Good evening. You're watching Asian Review, and I'm David Day. And our program this evening is all about France's new leadership in international affairs. And to help us with this discussion, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. David Santoro, who is with the Pacific Forum CSIS. Nice to have you with us, David.
Very nice. Thank you too, for having me.
And if you, ladies and gentlemen, if you listen to that accent very carefully, you'll notice that David was formerly a French national.
Still is actually.
You still are?
French citizen, yes.
And you are inbound to an American citizenship.
I got a green card in June last year, so I'm on the road to get American citizenship.
So what we wanted to do this evening, ladies and gentlemen, is to take advantage of David's strategic knowledge. He is an expert in the field of deterrence and nuclear proliferation with Pacific Forum CSIS here in Honolulu, and also to take advantage of his French background and talk about something that may come as a surprise to all of you, and that is that France has really, in the last several years, I don't know when we mark the starting point, David, but has really taken on a new leadership role in both foreign affairs as well as in military security affairs on the global stage. It's not just in the EU. And as an example that some of you may not know about is that French negotiators actually checked and then forced the U.S. State Department negotiators to tighten and upgrade the position of the Western countries in the Iran nuclear negotiations. Am I correct?
Right.
Is that right?
Right.
So there's a leadership role there that we want to talk a little bit more about in this program. And those of you who are watching this show, you're seeing the word France, and then behind us here, this gold structure that I want you to know, no need call into the program because we know this is not the Eiffel Tower.
No, that's right. I can confirm that as a French citizen, I guess. That's
actually, what you're looking at is the logo background for the Asian Review show. So yes, we know this is not the Eiffel Tower, and it's deliberately so. And even though we're talking about France, David, later in the show, let's kind of come full circle about how this French leadership ties in with our own Asia-Pacific region.
Absolutely,
okay?
And how that ties into U.S. alliances in Asia and throughout the world.
Control room, if you could give us photograph number one to kind of start off with. And David, I'd like to introduce this gentleman. He's not with us on this show, but we're hoping that in the future he could join us in shows that relate to Europe and the EU. Who is this gentleman that the audience is looking at now?
So what you, this is a picture of Bruno Tertre, who's a senior research fellow at the French Foundation for Strategic Research, which is one of the main think tanks, foreign policy think tanks in France, that focuses on strategic issues, but nuclear issues, France's foreign and military policy, as well as European issues as well.
Now, the reason we want to show you this picture, ladies and gentlemen, is because this gentleman is one of a top handful of strategic thinkers in France that is, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, he's kind of the intellectual tip of the spear in this new leadership role that France is taking in both foreign and military affairs, isn't
right?
It?
Absolutely. I mean, originally his focus has been nuclear issues, pretty much like the work that I'm doing. But he's one of the main thinkers, strategic thinkers in France, and may join us actually at some point later during this program.
All right, and if he doesn't, we'll work him into another show in the future.
Right.
Bruno Tertre.
Right.
And that man is somewhat like a youngish version of France's Henry Kissinger.
I guess you could say
Something
that.
like
I'm
that?
sure he'd like to hear that. So.
Okay. All right. Well, this topic, David, when we first presented this to our audience, I know there are many people out there that are thinking, you got to be kidding me, France taking a leadership on anything, and especially involving the global stage, international affairs, or military. The American perspective of the French is not one of an assertive leader,
Right.
if you will, in global affairs. And in fact, in some circles, the split in the Republican Party that exists, and so there's this conservative Tea Party group, and they refer to what the media is known as the more liberal or more moderate Republicans as French Republicans.
Right. This is one of the many names that France has been.
And so right, and even though the U.S. and France have been allies since the time of the American Revolution, the relationship, sometimes there've been some rough spots and some cultural miscues and so forth. But let's delve into this surprise, if you will, for our American audience here, and talk about some of the more recent foreign policy or military security moves that France has made that really demonstrate the leadership role that France has been taking. But before we do that, I think it's important. Can you give us kind of a picture of the France's defense military capability? Because I think that's a picture that most Americans don't have.
Right. No, absolutely. I think one of the important things to remember is France still is a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and that seat sort of gives it a role on international affairs. As you probably know, the permanent members of the UN Security Council all have veto power over important decisions, and so that gives France international standing. That's one thing. The other thing is that it's one of the 5 recognized nuclear armed states by the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which means that it is a nuclear weapons possessor and recognized as such by international law. It has a very vast military presence in the world, has important power projection capabilities.
Okay.
Now, of course, nowhere near as powerful as U.S. power projection capabilities, but still quite significant to be able to lead, military operations in at least in its near neighborhood.
Well, we'll talk about that power projector in just a second. And in addition to France's military and defense capability on the security side, doesn't France have a very sophisticated and well-developed diplomatic corps on the foreign policy side?
Absolutely. It's very vast, and that complements that military presence that I was just mentioning. The French diplomatic corps is quite wide, and it's spread out throughout the world. It's actually, I don't have the numbers with me, but I think it's not very far behind U.S. The U.S. numbers.
And we'll get to this later. France is a member of the G8 top economies in the world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's set aside, for purposes of this program, the concern or the derision, if you will, of that many Americans have of the socialist side of the Holland government, and that kind of the cheese-eating perspective that many Americans have.
I think this is pretty funny, by the way.
about the French. You can laugh. It's all right. We're having fun here. Let's set that aside, and I want to focus on the some of these areas and examples of France stepping up onto the world stage and really taking a leadership role. And maybe one dramatic example comes to mind is in the case of Libya.
Libya is definitely an example of French leadership. France basically took the lead, tried to push its lead through NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which unites the United States and its European allies, and actually through its air power capabilities and ground forces, actually sort of made the Libya military intervention contributed heavily to its success. So this was an example of the U.S. and the U.K. actually sort of taking the lead in this operation.
And if we've talked about the Iran nuclear negotiations, the tremendous caution, conservative, and practical advice,
Right.
that guidance that the French negotiators have been giving the American negotiators in that
Right,
whole.
right, and I mean this is exactly what we want for what the U.S. should, I believe, welcome. Like we want an ally to be contributing to actually pushing the envelope forward. That's the whole purpose of an alliance, really. Like you want the ally to be able to contribute positively to shaping outcomes.
All right, what about some other, I mean, we could lump them together, what other examples of French either humanitarian or military actions taking place in North Africa or the Middle East?
Right. Oh, the Middle East, for instance, Syria was an obvious example last summer when, after the chemical attacks in Syria, France was actually getting ready to, participate in a military intervention. So it had ramped up, its military, getting it ready to actually conduct an intervention in Syria. That's an example of French readiness to actually do
In
something
fact,
about it.
on that point, I understand the story is that the French had their jets on the tarmac
Right.
fired up and ready to go,
Right.
and because of a reversal in U.S. policy with Obama, they had
Well, the French were actually taken by surprise, to be honest. That Obama sort of shifted gears at the last minute. Now we don't have to discuss whether or not this was right or wrong, but the fact is that the French were actually ready to intervene militarily, and eventually didn't get to do it. The other important piece to that, and I think this is important for the audience to understand, is that unlike in the U.S. and in the U.K., the French president is allowed to conduct war without consulting Parliament. It's Parliament.
Interesting.
So that makes
Why?
it
Okay.
easier, I guess, to conduct rapid conduct rapid operation, or it helps decision making.
So that's why in a lot of instances we see France not only taking the lead, but they're on the move, because the French president can actually flip the switch without a lot of talk in the media, without moving Congress or Parliament to support him.
Right. Now, I mean, of course,
There's a limit to that, I understand.
yeah, there's consultations to be had and everything, but it's not. There's no decision by the Parliament that needs to take place for that to happen.
Control room, let's take a look at photograph number 5, if we could, on this topic. And David, these are some French troops. Why are we looking at this picture, and where are they?
This is this is in Africa, to be honest. I wouldn't be able to tell you where in Africa, because
Okay.
France is actually involved in a lot of African countries and has military presence in Africa a lot. But that's, the French military is in Africa, is operating, has a permanent military presence in many African countries, and over the past few years has actually conducted military interventions in Mali, Chad, and right now in the Central African Republic.
Control room, photograph number 6, if we could, please. And so, again, on this particular point that you're talking about, David, again, these are French soldiers in one of those African countries.
Right. I think this one is from the Central African Republic.
And why in the African countries? Why has France been intervening militarily or bringing security forces to bear? Why?
Right. Well, so it depends on the countries. In Mali, it was essentially to target Al Qaeda or Al Qaeda minded groups and try to address the problem of the growing terrorism movements in the northern part of Mali, as well as respond to increasing drug routes that were being created in the Sahel region. That's for Mali. In the Central African Republic, this was more response to a humanitarian problem and the fact that we are in a situation of what the UN has called pre-genocide. So the French interventions vary from country to country.
Okay, but in all of these are former French colonies that they're intervening in?
Yes, most, yes.
Okay, and
right.
so...
Or where France has a very deep knowledge of the culture, the landscapes, the situation.
And in most of these, France is going it alone.
Most of them, yes.
Interesting.
Right.
So at least in the immediate neighborhood, you know, we see France really taking a powerful leadership role in trying to handle things like terrorism and drug
right.
problems, humanitarian and genocide, those types of things, in that immediate neighborhood.
In that immediate neighborhood,
okay.
Particularly because it was, you know, a former colonial power with knowledge of the country, and so that sort of creates, you know, to make the conditions fertile for French intervention.
Control room, if we could have photograph number 2 for a moment here. This just to show the alliance, the relationship between the U.S. and the French government.
Right. So this is this was actually taken during the state visit of French President François Hollande in Washington, so he met with Obama. He stayed at the White House and discussed France's foreign policy roles among other things.
You know, the significance, ladies and gentlemen, of that photograph of and the visit of the French President Hollande to the U.S. Will become more apparent as we go in a little bit more depth in this program, and talking about France's new leadership on the world stage in terms of foreign affairs and security issues. We're going to turn, after the commercial break coming up here, to a more immediate crisis that's going on right in the European neighborhood, and that is France's involvement in the current Ukraine crisis. And we'll do that with David Santoro when we come back after the break. Stay with us.
Castle and Cook, Hawaii. Investing in Hawaii, creating communities, and providing for the needs of our state. Collateral Analytics, empowering the real estate industry to make better informed property investment decisions. The Foreign Trade Zone, bringing the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone programs to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. Galen Ho, a senior executive of BAE Systems, a global defense, security, and aerospace company. Hawaiian Electric Company and its affiliates Maui Electric and Hawaii Electric Light Company on Hawaii Island. The Hawaii Energy Policy Forum, incorporating diverse perspectives to design a flexible and forward-looking energy strategy. Hawaii Energy, the state's energy and efficiency program created to help Hawaii's residents and businesses adopt a clean energy lifestyle. Hawaii Gas, helping Hawaii achieve its transition to clean energy and a better energy future. Hawaii Pacific Health, bringing technology and teamwork together to transform healthcare in Hawaii. The High Tech Development Corporation, attached to DBED, is the state's leading technology agency. The Scheidler Family Foundation, supporting educational, cultural, and charitable organizations, including ThinkTech.
We're back. You're watching Asian Review. I'm David Day, and we're joined by Mr. David Santoro from the Pacific Forum, CSIS, here in Honolulu. And David is a French national, and we're talking about France's new leadership in international affairs. And right at the break, David, we talked about moving this conversation into the current crisis in the Ukraine,
right.
and I guess the question that I need to ask you is, so what is France doing there? I mean, that's right in the neighborhood. There are a lot of competing considerations with the Russians. What can you tell us about that situation?
Well, I mean, the situation, of course, is a developing story. I mean, unfortunately, it's still going on, so it's not really clear what will happen. What the French have done so far is host the U.S., European allies, and of course the Russians to, it seems, play a role, a bit of a broker to sort of facilitate talks among the two.
And those are being held in Paris.
Held in Paris. You've had John Kerry, and others, sort of, and the Russian Foreign Ministry actually meeting and sort of trying to talk and promising to talk over the next hours. I was just reading before the show, and the next days to try and find a solution to the current crisis. Now, that's one aspect to what France is doing. The other aspect is
This is the nice
facilitation talks.
Okay. But they're not
aspect.
really a neutral broker,
No,
right?
absolutely not. Because again, like we said, France is very much a U.S. ally, and it's a Western power. It's always been a Western power, and tied to its Western traditions. So in addition to these talks, what France is doing is push the envelope for EU sanctions to be adopted against Russia and what is happening in Ukraine.
So is it fair to say that among the EU nations that France is the big pusher for heavy sanctions against Russia in the EU?
I think this is absolutely. I think this is correct. I think
So in terms of the whole Ukraine crisis, the EU leader or point country
right.
is not Germany.
It's not German. Well, I mean, I think that's
Not like we would see in the financial affairs of the EU.
right. Yeah, I mean, there was the famous saying during the Cold War. You had the French at least were saying, well, Germany has the Dutch mark and we have the atom. So the French had the nuclear weapons. Germany had the economic power. Now this is obviously that it's still true. The biggest economy is Germany in Europe,
Okay.
and France is still nuclear power. But France has been trying to develop a security relationship with Berlin, closer security relationship with Berlin, and it's been unable to do so. That relationship has worked in the industry sector a little bit, actually quite well, with defense companies being formed. But in terms of security cooperation beyond that, it's been actually not that good. So the country really sort of pushing the envelope for sanctions is France and the UK.
Okay, we'll get to the UK in a bit here. Control room, if you could show our audience photograph number 4. Now, in terms of the leadership role that France is taking in this whole crisis involving the Ukraine, who is this gentleman that the audience is looking at now?
So this is Mr. Laurent Fabius, who's the French Foreign Affairs Minister.
Okay, and my understanding is that in the last 2 days, he took a stand that kind of reflects what you were saying here, and he was taking the position that we want to hold these talks,
Right.
but at the same time we're going to set up some very severe sanctions on the other side for the Russians.
That's right. That's right. He's been spearheading that sort of two-track approach.
Okay, and so in fact, France has been out in front of the U.S. in terms of actually taking some sanctioned steps, have they not? Has the country not?
Again, this is a developing story. I would have to go back and check exactly who was leading the process, but I think that France was definitely one of the proponent of sanctions in the EU. And for instance, it was the first one to say that it would not go to the G8 Sochi meeting.
Okay, so let's put that in perspective. The U.S. position over the last few days is we're not going to attend
Right.
the preliminary planning session for the G8
Absolutely.
meeting.
Right.
And France joined Canada, took it one giant step further and said, basically, forget about the planning meeting. We're not going to the G8 meeting at all.
Right. So I mean, you could say in that sense that it's taken a tougher stance on on that particular topic.
Well, France's position vis-a-vis the Ukraine and the Russians is complicated by a trade relationship, is it not?
Right. So France has promised to sell 2 warship carriers to Russia, which technically are meant to be delivered by the end of the year. So
These are aircraft carriers or amphibious?
warship carriers.
Okay.
Now, this is still sort of going to take place, and France has so far not agreed to cut its trade ties with Russia over what's going on in Ukraine. But obviously the relationship between France and Russia, and actually, in fact, between Europe and Russia, is complicated because, Russia is a large energy, whether in gas or oil provider. So that sort of complicates a little bit the way the Europeans and others can deal with Russia.
And Russia has something like 18 oil and gas pipelines that flow to the EU, to the European countries, through the Ukraine.
Right.
And
actually, Russia back in 2006 actually used that leverage over Ukraine, cutting off supply.
yeah, I think it's called, I think the term is called valve diplomacy or something.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I mean, this is something that has to count when you're trying to respond to Russia.
So you have the trade relationship, and then either as a subcategory of the trade relationship or an independent topic is the whole issue of energy.
Right.
And so that makes the dance very delicate that France has to do with the European countries, because they've got an energy problem that, I mean, is France in a position to export its nuclear power?
Absolutely, it is exporting nuclear technology, and it has been doing that for a long time.
I'm not talking about the technology. I'm talking about actual, electric power from its nuclear plants to other EU countries.
Right, but that's a relationship that would have to be developed.
So that's not something you can do right away.
No.
Okay.
No. Now, I mean, I guess one important thing as well is NATO and European countries have tried to develop a relationship with Russia, and are still trying to develop a relationship with Russia to make sure that NATO is not seen as directly confrontational to Russia over the sort of broader strategic issues. So the Ukraine situation is definitely something that demands a response from Europe, but at the same time, there's I would think a very strong willingness from European powers to not jeopardize the broader relationship with Russia that Europeans have tried to develop with Moscow over the years.
Well, this over the last few years, the actual functioning of NATO and on the security side, as well as the performance of the EU, has been, something between dysfunctional and non-existent, somewhere in there. And so a very difficult leadership role for France to play in organizing that coalition and getting them to move forward in a lockstep.
Right, absolutely. One thing that I think you're right. First of all, the relationship between NATO and the EU itself, institutional relationship, is extremely complicated because the EU is trying to take on a bigger share of the defense and security burden.
Okay.
But at the same time, NATO is the military alliance, the main one in Europe, so that this relationship is complicated. One thing that I think is important and worth mentioning is that in the 1960s, in 1966, France withdrew from the military command of NATO, and since 2008 has decided to rejoin that command, this military structure, which is another signal of French leadership, but French leadership that is willing to work insofar as possible within the alliance structure. Not so much as an independent player, but more as a player that would act within the U.S. alliance system.
David, this is a fascinating discussion, and I know for an American audience, it comes as a great surprise to us when you start putting these pieces on the table about the new French leadership in international affairs. And I guess the question that's on everybody's mind is, why has this come about? Why has France taken this position? And we're going to go to a commercial break now, but I'd like you to think about that, the why. And when we come back from the break, let's see if we can dig down into this and help our American audience understand why France is taking this kind of role.
That's good.
All right, we'll see you after the break.
I'm Jay Fidel. That's Sharon Moriwaki of the Hawaii Energy Policy Forum. And every Wednesday we have Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy. We've been doing it for some time now, and we have some fantastic guests on there, unbelievable guests who give us insight into what is going on in a very complex, sometimes very confusing, sometimes very disappointing area of progress in the state. So we love doing this. We love meeting them. We love talking to them. We love having their ideas out on the table. So maybe, just maybe, we can all make some sense of what's going on. Sharon, what do you think?
I think that's absolutely correct. We enjoy ourselves meeting with all these people and hearing about the energy and the state of clean energy, and hopefully we advance clean energy for the state. So it's terrific. Join us.
Okay, it's every Wednesday. Okay, Wednesday is Energy Day. Every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, here on ThinkTech Hawaii. We'll see you there.
We're back. You're watching Asian Review. I'm David Day, and our special guest today, I'm delighted to have again on our show, is Mr. David Santoro from Pacific Forum CSIS. And nice to have you here, David.
Nice to be here.
We have got, ladies and gentlemen, in case you just joined the show, a fascinating conversation underway about, the big surprise for Americans that France has really taken a new leadership role in international affairs. And earlier in the program, David, we were talking about the defense and military capability that France has as a nuclear power, and its leadership role in Libya, in a number of the different African countries, the Iran nuclear negotiations, and the attempted role that it was ready to play with its jets on the tarmac fired up in the Syrian crisis and had to back down. And now we were talking about some of the powerful broker role, plus pushing the EU on sanction side in the current Ukraine crisis. And the question I posed to you right before the break was, why? Why has this happened? And is this, is this a French effort to reclaim their prior prestige?
So this argument obviously has been advanced. I would think that there's a little bit of that because, as I said, as we alluded to, France is still in the Security Council, wants to play an international role, and can play an international role based on its capabilities. So there's in the French psyche a very strong willingness to be an international player. Again, former President Jacques Chirac was pushing the vision of a multipolar world where you had different sort of powers around the world, France, of course, being one of them. So I think you have a little bit of that. I don't think that this is the main driver behind what's going on in France's recent interventionism.
All right. Well, so is it because France is trying to play, as you say, the Deutschmark atom balance to Germany?
No. I think there's every time France makes a decision, they think about Germany and the impact with the French-German decision. But I think that France, and we've talked a little bit about this before, has tried to develop a security and defense relationship with Germany, and this hasn't gone very far. So again, this would not be the main driver behind what's going on.
Okay, well, let me come at you in a different direction then. is the reason for France's the new leadership? Does it have to do with the domestic politics? You've got these scandals, President Holland riding around on a motor scooter, hiding from his mistress or something like that,
which is pretty okay in France, by the way.
High taxation.
Right.
So is this foreign policy assertiveness and leadership? Is this a counterbalance to the domestic politics?
That's an argument that has been pushed. Look, France is doing all this in the foreign policy arena because usually it's popular. The French usually support France's foreign policy, and this is a way to distract public opinion from what's going on at home. I personally don't think that this is a valid argument for what's going on now as well, because on the contrary, the French government would want to sort of try and advertise what it's doing, or the efforts that it's doing, and make them popular, and without sort of making the foreign policy agenda the center of attention. So it's going to play for a little bit, but I don't think that this is the main thing.
Okay, I noticed that you talked about a number of humanitarian, terrorism, drug, genocide type interventions in Africa that France has made essentially unilaterally. Now, is it possible that the rationale, the secret push behind France's assertiveness or leadership, is it a drive to get raw materials and energy?
No, regarding energy and raw materials, I don't think that this is the main driver, because France is not really in need for that kind of things now, especially in the countries in which it's intervening. But at the same time, you mentioned the need to actually respond to terrorism, fight Al Qaeda, drugs, and also respond to humanitarian intervention, like as is the case right now in the Central African Republic. I think this is more the main driver behind French policy. That it's better to try and nip the problem in the bud. Respond to terrorism or emerging terrorism in some of these countries.
So that's the real why.
That I would sort of rank that number one. Now the rest of the things that we've discussed have to play some role, but I think the main why is that particular problem. Responding to terrorism and not wait for terrorism cells to grow and proliferate.
Well, why is France, okay, I see this, but has the French stepping up, or France's step up onto the world stage, has that, why, the reason they're doing it, does their perception of American involvement have anything to do with that?
I think it does. I think at the same time, France, if you look back to the 1960s, France has always been intervening quite a lot in its near neighborhood. I think it's definitely stepped up its game over the past few years, and this has to do with the fact that A, it can, B, it wants to, and C, it recognizes that the US will not be able to do all this because of fiscal difficulties, because of a whole lot of other problems, and therefore it's stepping up its game to sort of not replace, but certainly play its part as an ally, particularly in the areas where it can do so effectively.
So kind of carrying its share, its burden, picking up more of that. What does, in very recent times, we've seen the British and the UK in a lot of areas that relate to foreign policy and security affairs kind of step down a bit. And do you think that's been a partial motivation for France as they're looking at traditionally the British over the last, throughout the Cold War, we look back at the Margaret Thatcher era, I mean, clearly they were the powerhouse.
The special relationship. Right, absolutely. Right. I think it still is. I think, the US is very much in favor of preserving and even strengthening the special relationship that it has with the UK, but developing a stronger relationship, not stronger to the UK, but a stronger relationship with France is also definitely something that Washington wants. And in addition to that, in addition to developing stronger relationships with its two allies, European allies, I think the US would think that it has a lot to gain by seeing cooperation being developed among its two allies, between France and the UK.
Well, is that in fact what's been happening?
And this is exactly what's been happening. In 2010, the French and the UK signed the landmark Defense and Security Cooperation Treaty, which is sort of a framework to enhance cooperation in a whole lot of different security issues, including in the nuclear area.
So you're talking about now the significance of this kind of a new alliance that France has made with the UK.
Right.
And I guess the question that I'm asking is slightly different than that, and that is France's step up on the world stage, at least in Europe, in part because for budgetary reasons, and I think war weary, the UK has had to back down, and so France is fulfilling that vacuum or that void a bit.
Maybe a little bit, you could say, but I think it's cooperation with London is very important to Paris, and so every time. Moving forward, France will sort of promote that line to try and sort of develop stronger relationship with London, and therefore with the US and its NATO allies.
What's the rationale for the building a stronger relationship with London? Why does Paris find that so important?
I think it's important for fiscal reasons, but European fiscal reasons. France is like the US, like the UK, undergoing, going through very, problematic fiscal problems, and therefore, and so is the UK, and so combining or enhancing cooperation actually helps these two powers do more together.
I see. Okay.
So it's a burden sharing exercise really, and that's true among European powers, as it is true with the U.S. as well.
Boy, what a fascinating series of developments! And when we come back after the next break, I want to talk with you, David, about how these developments and alliances that France has been recently building in the UK area, with the UK and also with the EU, how those mirror back into our own Asia-Pacific region here. But we'll do that after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. I'm David Day. You're watching Asian Review.
I'm Hong Jiang. I'm hosting Tuesdays Asia in Review at ThinkTech Hawaii between 4 to 5 p.m. In my shows, we bring to you important issues and events in Asia, issues related to the culture, society, the environment, and history. We want you to be more connected to events happening in Asia and in the world. So see you there.
Aloha, I'm Maria Kashem of ThinkTech Hawaii, and I want to tell you about our ThinkTech talk shows. If you didn't know it, ThinkTech streams video and audio for all of its shows live on the internet from 2 to 5 p.m. every weekday afternoon, and we replay them all night long on Ustream.tv. Visit ThinkTechHawaii.com for our live stream and YouTube links. Raise your awareness on ThinkTech. I'm Maria Kashem, and I'll see you there.
We're back, and we have a fascinating conversation underway about France's new leadership in international affairs. I'm David Day. You're watching Asian Review, and we are broadcasting right here from the Pioneer Plaza in the heart of downtown Honolulu. And our special guest is Mr. David Santoro from Pacific Forum, CSIS. And in case you just joined us, this gentleman is a French national.
Absolutely, yes.
And is really shed some light on a fascinating topic for us here. At the break, David, we were talking about this kind of a most unusual alliance that's really been put together between Paris and London.
Right.
And this is in the security cooperation field primarily. Is there a trade piece to that as well?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, that's also part of the things that France will want to sort of push. That particular treaty that got signed in 2010 was focused on defense and security, defense cooperation, and it's significant for all the reasons we've talked about. What's very significant is that it's a treaty, which is a framework, establishes set in stone, an actual cooperation. It's more than just a partnership. It establishes the relationship for the years to come. And the second piece is that it includes actually cooperation in the nuclear area, which has always been very sensitive.
This is cooperation in terms of nuclear weapons or nuclear power?
In terms of nuclear weapons or nuclear arsenals. So that's definitely something that took a lot of people by surprise, to be honest. And you have to understand that, of course, the French have always had close but also difficult relationship with the UK because of historical reasons.
That's right.
But moving forward, this is definitely a relationship that I think will prosper, will develop, and this is something that is, as far as I'm concerned, very advantageous to the United States, because in a lot of the operations that France and the UK will take on in the Middle East, in its near neighborhood, in Africa, the US doesn't have to take the lead and can actually sort of rely on its ally to take a lot of the burden.
Makes good sense.
Now, at the same time, and I guess this is something that is important, if you have France and the UK leading in some of these operations, that doesn't mean they want to lead or they want to take on more without relying on the United States for support.
Okay.
I think France can do a lot on its own, and so can the UK. But at the same time, they rely a lot on intelligence cooperation with the United States. In some of the operations that France has conducted in Africa and elsewhere, it's relied on air refueling capabilities from the United States and other types of assistance. So this is, again, that comes back to the point I was making earlier. France is willing to lead on some theaters, but it's also willing to get assistance and work within the framework of an alliance relationship.
So it's become what we would call an upper middle power.
I guess you could call that.
Okay.
I actually like that concept.
All right, and so let's take and mirror now this new alliance between Paris and London.
Right.
And flip it into the Asia Pacific region
Right,
here,
where we are.
Where we are, and so what does that portend, or how might that be helpful in this region?
So, I mean, this is again something that the United States has tried to encourage. In the area where I work is essentially, nuclear deterrence and how that relates to alliance relationships. Now, there's a lot of differences between the way extended deterrence is being conducted in Europe as it is conducted in Northeast Asia. But I think the United States is trying to encourage its two Northeast Asian allies, Japan and the ROK, to do more together, to be able to respond better to a contingency involving North Korea or even China in some context.
So what you're saying is that the French leadership in the European EU side in building an alliance with the UK is something that the United States may be able to use as a successful example to build a mirror type relationship between South Korea, Japan, and the U.S.
That would be the ideal model from a U.S. perspective, as far as I'm concerned. But the fact is that the current state of Japan-South Korea relations are definitely not close to conclude that type of an agreement and be as tightly working together, just like the French and the British are. But you could actually take the view that this is something that's going on that the two Northeast Asian allies could aim for.
Okay.
Now, and again, as I said, like the French and the British have a treaty. It's broad defense and security cooperation, but it's possible to envision some type of cooperation between the Japanese and the South Koreans on specific topics like extended deterrence.
Okay. Well, that's David, we're out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation, and I've learned a lot. And ladies and gentlemen, I hope you have as well. Stay with us. We'll be back at the same time slot next Thursday. You've been watching Asian Review, and I'm your host, David Day. Please have a safe drive home, and good night.